Hello, good evening. We're going to get started. If you want to take your seats, or you can stand if you want. Thank you for coming to tonight's program. My name is Bailey Krell, and I'm the operations assistant here at the Jefferson. It is my pleasure to kick off tonight's event, and I'm going to do three things. I'm going to go over some housekeeping notes, tell you about the upcoming events, and introduce our speaker for the evening. First, for some housekeeping, if you need assistance during the event, you can find me or any of the volunteers in the back of the room. We're happy to help. If you need the restroom, go out the door and they're up the stairs. And some reminders for the question and answer portion at the end. Please raise your hand to be called on, and a microphone will be brought to you. We're going to try and alternate with our volunteers on where the questions are. And then also, please keep your questions brief and concise. Refrain from offering lengthy statements and stories. If you want to talk to our speaker afterward, feel free to, and that will be the time for your lengthy statements. And now for our upcoming events. Tomorrow at noon, Dr. Garland will be here for his last presentation with us in his speaker series, A Day in History, the Bombing of Hiroshima, August 6, 1945. The next week, on Monday at 6 p.m., Brian Graff will deliver a lecture at the Lincoln Community Library titled The Union Timberclads on the Mississippi River in 1861 during the Civil War. Finally, on Tuesday at 6 p.m., Dr. Jeff Bloodworth will be in Corey to present Men in Crisis, Class, Despair, and Politics, exploring a new series and why it matters. And lastly, I would like to introduce our presenter for the evening. Dr. Robert Garland is the Roy D. and Margaret B. Worcester Emeritus Professor of the Classics at Colgate University. Dr. Garland is also the author of many books, including but not limited to The Greek Way of Death, The Eye of the Beholder, Athens Burning, and the book that we've been selling here all week, What to Expect When You're Dead, an ancient tour of death and the afterlife. Just so you know, we are still selling those books, and if you would like to purchase them, Dr. Garland will be available afterwards to sign them. Let's give Dr. Garland a warm JES welcome.
Just to make sure this is working. It is. Well, good evening, and I'm delighted to be back again tonight, and will be as well tomorrow. I've had a wonderful time here this week, and just in case you're not going to be here tomorrow, I want to thank you all for your curiosity, your attentiveness, your geniality, your enthusiasm. So it's been a wonderful week for me, not over yet, of course, but I really have had an extraordinary time here. I was saying today that of all the times I've stood in front of some people to talk to, this is one of the most memorable. All the questions that you've asked me on subjects that I didn't know that you would be necessarily particularly interested in, you've really done me proud, so thank you all very much. So this evening we're talking about an event that really did shape the world and which took place quite accidentally in some sense, as we'll see, and did so in a way that still resonates to this very day. And I'm taking you to the Balkans this evening, and there's a map of the Balkans on the board there, what it looks like today. It is a troubled region, one might say. One of the issues that was at stake until recently was the naming of Macedonia, which the Greeks were not happy about, because Macedonia, as far as they're concerned, was the land which Alexander the Great came from. And so for another country, another nationality, to claim the name Macedonia was to them not only an insult to their national honor, but it was, as it were, laying claims upon Greece itself. So they objected fiercely, and finally agreement was reached that the place could be called the Republic of Northern Macedonia, its name today. So that is where we're going to be this evening. And we're in the year 1914. And 1914 was a time when Europe was all tied up with alliances, primarily two great alliances called the Triple Entente, which was an alliance which Russia, France, and Britain had, which was not an absolutely binding alliance, not so forceful as the other one opposing it, which was the Triple Alliance, Italy, Austria-Hungary, and Germany. So the Triple Alliance, the Triple Entente. And as you can see, there is Bulgaria and Serbia in the middle. The Ottoman Empire was still a force at this time and would be drawn into the war eventually, but was not initially involved with it. So we can see that with these two great alliances locked in against each other, in theory, anything could set them off. And in practice, of course, it did. Another way in which the continent of Europe was connected was by the grandmother of Europe, as she is sometimes referred to, that is to say, Queen Victoria. And we see there the three main monarchies, the Hapsburgs, who ruled in Austria-Hungary, the Hohenzollerns, who ruled in Germany, and the Romanovs, who ruled in Russia. And Queen Victoria was the grandmother of Wilhelm II, who was the emperor, the Tsar, the Kaiser, he called himself, in Germany. And Nicholas II was married to the granddaughter of Queen Victoria. So we have these two interlocking pieces on the eve of war, so to speak. We have both the political, diplomatic ties between two great structures, the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance, but we also have the familial ties as well. And of course, in a sense, they're competing against each other. And shortly before the outbreak of war in 1914, the German ambassador to Paris made this remark: peace is at the mercy of an accident. He realized that there was what we call a tinderbox waiting to be lit in Europe, given the allegiances that had been built up between these two alliances. So, the Austro-Hungarian Empire is what we need to focus on primarily to begin with. It is an empire built on Austria on the one hand and Hungary on the other hand. Austria was the dominant force, Hungary was subservient, and Franz Joseph was the emperor. He was the emperor of Austria, and he was essentially the king of Hungary because Hungary was, as I say, a subsidiary power. And this empire was not in good shape in 1914. It was disunited, it had not moved with the times, morale was low. And in a sense, the assassination of Archduke Francis Ferdinand was what the Austro-Hungarian Empire was waiting for. It was an opportunity to flex its muscles and re-establish itself as an important world power. And there it is, green, as you see on the map on the left there. And if you look on the right there, you can see Austro-Hungary in orange, surrounded by various other countries, notably Serbia to the south there, the pink piece of land there. Now, Serbia was, at this time, it too was on the ascendant because it had been very successful in the Balkan Wars, which had been fought in 1912 to 1913. And these were fought against the Ottomans, and they had, the result of these wars had been, number one, the Ottomans had been driven out of Europe, and number two, Serbia had increased in size. And I'll come back to that slide in a moment, but just to this one first. There's the Balkan Wars, and you can see Serbia there with those striated lines underneath it, that was the land which Serbia acquired as a result of the Balkan Wars in 1912 to 1913. So it increased considerably in size. It was very nationalistic at this point, and yet there were a number of Serbs living in Hungary. And that was the bone of contention, and that was why Serb nationalism was keen to disrupt the Austro-Hungarian Empire and achieve a kind of pan-Slav objective, which was to unite all the Slavs under one umbrella. So just to go back to this slide here, the Archduke Francis Ferdinand, he was 51 years of age, and he was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And he is shown here with his wife, Sophie. And the irony is that although he is going to be assassinated, spoiler, he, in fact, was quite favorable to the Serbs. And he wanted to see them have a larger role in government. So, sadly, in a sense, he was a victim, whereas his political inclinations made him favorable to the Serbs. But he also was the most important person representing the head of the Austro-Hungarian army. So he was in a difficult position, of course. So he is visiting Sarajevo on a political mission, really, at the time when he is assassinated with his wife. He's visiting Sarajevo, which is in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and you can see there that Bosnia-Herzegovina is to the west of Serbia, and he's been sent there by Franz Joseph kind of to rattle his sword a bit, to make Serbia realize that Austro-Hungary was a force to be reckoned with, and that it was watching closely what was happening in Serbia. So his mission there was definitely and decidedly political. So he's in Sarajevo on the 28th of June, 1914. And these are the last pictures that we have of him alive. And there he is in his car. And on the right there, he is with his wife, Sophie. And you can see it's an open-top car. Not surprising at that point. But in addition, there were very few police escort, only 170. And this might be said to have been just calamitously low. Ironically, there were 70,000 troops just outside Sarajevo because there was a strong military presence in the country to sort of keep Serbia in check. And so they could easily have made some more suitable checks to safeguard his life, but they didn't. And clearly he felt that he was very, very safe. And of course, he wasn't. So a conspiracy was formed among a number of young Bosnians. Young Bosnia was the name, the official name of a terrorist organization, and they were operating under the umbrella of a larger organization called Black Hand, and their motto was unification or death. And it was their avowed aim, as I say, to disrupt the Austro-Hungarian Empire and to take whatever steps they could to form this theoretical pan-Slav entity by expanding the territory that Serbia had. And they were encouraged, as I say, by the Balkan Wars. And there's Princip on the left there, Gavrilo Princip, and he was the one who ultimately would fire the pistol. There were actually 6 assassins, or potential assassins, that were en route, all at different places. He was the only one who actually had a firearm. The others had bombs attached to their waist, and their job was to throw the bomb and hope that it would hit the target, which it didn't, of course. And there on the right, there is the insignia of the Black Hand organization. So here, with absolute certainty, we can outline the moments of that fatal day. And we begin at 10 o'clock in the morning. Francis Ferdinand and Sophie begin their ride in a motorcade of 6 cars to visit Sarajevo Town Hall, to give speeches, to be received, and so forth, but to be a presence in Sarajevo that would send, it was hoped, a warning to Serbia. And as they're proceeding along their route, the first 2 conspirators just lose their nerve and fail to act. And at 10:15, the third of the conspirators, Kabrinovic, throws a bomb at the Archduke's car, but it hits the black hood behind and it explodes underneath because it had a 30-second delay. So the car is able to speed up. But it does cause damage to the car behind and several people are wounded. And this is almost farcical. He swallows a cyanide pill, but it doesn't work. He jumps into the river, but it's only 4 inches deep. So not a very professional assassin, one might say. But they all, by the way, carried cyanide pills with them because there was a great expectation that if they were caught, of course, that they would be facing very severe punishment. So the motorcade continues to the town hall, and Francis Ferdinand kind of brushes it all aside when he gets there. He sort of almost pretends as if, oh, well, look, nothing happened. Yes, some people got injured, but here I am, and everything is fine. No, it's quite all right. And, well, look, we'll go ahead as planned, and afterwards I'm going to visit the people who were injured in hospital. So it's like change of plan at that point. And so 10:45, he leaves. And this is what changes the course of history. And would we be in different circumstances today if it had not happened that this mistake was made? It so happens that although the decision was taken to visit the hospital, and I'll show you the map here now, I think if I try to use this before, let's hope. Is it this thing? Oh, I knew I'd do that. Sorry. Oh, there we are, I'm back there. I'm just going to point to it, if you don't mind. Here he is at the town hall, over here, and he's taken this course along here, and this is beside the river in Sarajevo. And you can see there's number 1, number 2, number 3. This is where the car gets hit. And this is where Princip was stationed. But what happened was that when the procession was hit, it raced past, and he didn't get a chance to fire anyway. And he might have expected that, in fact, the assassination attempt had succeeded. So it proceeds to the town hall, and as I say, the decision is taken to go to the hospital over here, but instead the driver is not informed of the change of plan. How could that possibly be? So what he does is he turns up here, and it so happens that Gavrilo Princip is sitting in a delicatessen shop, drinking a cappuccino, eating a croissant. That's made up. I don't know what he was doing. But he was certainly in the delicatessen shop at that point. And lo and behold, the car stops. It stops and it stalls. And so while the driver is trying to reverse the car, Gavrilo Princip comes out and he fires 2 shots. And firstly, he shoots at the head. He hits him on the head, strikes him on the head of the Archduke, and then he strikes in the abdomen Sophie, his wife, and they both die as a result of the attack. And it's all by accident, in a sense. It could so easily have gone the other way. And here's the scene of the crime, so to speak. They were traveling along here, and there's the bridge. There was some kind of delicatessen shop there, so he had time well to fire his 2 shots. But what an accident that was. So we obviously don't have any shots of the actual scene, as we would have today. Probably somebody would have taken a video. So we just have an artist's impression. And there it is. He's holding his head because he's been hit in the head. And there is his wife, and she's about to be shot as well. And I'm interested always in, how we know what we know. And of course, I cannot help but compare that with this event, where we have, of course, actual footage of the crime being committed. And all that would have reached the newspapers, as I say, would have been this artist impression of the assassination. What we do have, however, is the blood-stained regimental uniform that the Archduke was wearing, with the blood on the coat. And there they are, both lying, waiting to be buried. Princip is arrested. All the assassins are arrested, except one. One escapes to Serbia and is never caught. And he is later tried in October. And I'm not going to say much more about Princip. He will come up at the end again. But he was tried, found guilty. But because of his youth, he was only 18 years of age, he could not be executed according to the law. And so he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. In fact, he died of tuberculosis, I think in 1918, just 4 years later. So this set off a very fast-forward set of actions in consequence, and we call this the July crisis. And if you look at the first date there, the 28th of June, that's the date when Francis Ferdinand was assassinated, and you look at the next date there, look at 28th of July, exactly 1 month, and World War I has taken place. That's an extraordinary, even where we're in fast-forward mode today, but go back to 1918, and that is really amazing that the world, as it were, collapsed in those 4 weeks. And it was all due to the fact, as I was mentioning at the beginning, which I'll come back to in a moment, the alliances that had been built up. So it was like a domino effect. But just look at the other events in this list here. Francis Ferdinand's funeral. And then, what do we learn? A commission instituted by Austro-Hungary determines that the Serbian government was not complicit. Because if the Serbian government was complicit, then that would give Austro-Hungary every reason to respond in the way it did. Instead, it issues an ultimatum to Serbia. There are 10 demands that it makes. Serbia agrees to 10 of them, but the other 2 it can't. And one of those 2 is that the Austro-Hungarian police force should be allowed to enter Serbia and hunt down any others who might have been complicit in the plot. And this was almost like saying you no longer have autonomy, you're no longer an independent kingdom, which is what Serbia was at this point. And it was clear that Serbia was being set up. Austro-Hungary had demanded these ultimatums precisely so that Serbia would refuse. So, 26th of July, Serbia accepts 8 of those terms, refuses 2 of them, and 2 days later, Austria-Hungary declares war. And barely a week later, there's Germany crossing the Belgian frontier and making what it hopes to be will be a preemptive strike against France. So this is again how the world looked at this point in 1914. And you see the grey countries there, Britain, France, and Russia. That is the Triple Entente. And Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. That is the Triple Alliance there. And this is Serbia, of course, down here. And if Germany had not entered the war, Austria-Hungary would not have been able really to wage it. There is Franz Joseph on the left in that magnificent headpiece. But look at the Kaiser, what he's wearing. I think it's no contest as to who wins that competition. So, as I said a moment ago, it's a domino effect. Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, and Serbia is Russia's ally. And it might have been thought that Russia would not intervene in the war, because after all, it was sort of on the sidelines here. And so why would it bother? And yet it did, and that made a big difference, and it would make a huge difference, of course, to Russia itself as a result of becoming involved in the war. And then Russia declared war on Austria-Hungary, Germany's ally, and Germany declared war on Russia, France's ally, and Britain joined in to protect France. And the United States finally came in 1917. So one of the first things that happened during the war was that Germany tried to implement what was known as the Schließen Plan, and that was to attack France by going round the back. These were the French troops over here, and here's Germany coming from Germany to sort of encircle the French from behind. But it didn't work out like that at all. If it had, the war might have ended very quickly, but as we know, it didn't. Everybody thought that the war was going to end very quickly. In Britain, they were all saying, oh, it'll be over by Christmas. It was only Lord Kitchener who said, no, it's going to go on for 3 years. He was wrong. It went on for 4 years, of course. And it witnessed one of the most terrible forms of warfare that has ever existed, which is to say trench warfare. And as you know what this means, people going over the top and just trying to take half a, whatever it might be, kilometer of land, and then being driven back the next day as it might be. All being fought for very, very little land in terrible conditions, and thousands upon thousands of men dying. One of the worst battles was the Battle of the Somme. There we are, those are the figures. 420,000 British, 200,000 French, 500,000 German casualties. The British lost more men. They lost 37,000 men on the first day of the Battle of the Somme. That was, nothing in history, in warfare, was comparable to that. It also produced some wonderful poetry. Not all wars have produced poetry. The Second World War has not produced really great literature, but the First World War did, and other writings as well. But this, I think, is one of the finest pieces. The poem is called Dulce et decorum est. It's by an English poet, Wilfred Owen, who died the week that the armistice was declared. And he was only 25 years of age. And these are the final lines of his poem here. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory, the old lie, dulce et decorum est, pro patria morai. It is sweet and pleasant to die for one's country. So he had full reason to know the horrors of war, and at the same time, he was a very brave soldier. He could have got out of the war. He actually was injured and was absolutely determined to come back, as many were. Many pacifists fought in that war, but they returned to it, if injured, say, because of loyalty to their comrades. So he was by no means somebody who just wrote poetry or whatever. He was committed to, if not the cause, to the deep sense of brotherhood that he felt for other men who were serving in these terrible conditions. And on the left there, this is Lord Kitchener. This is a very famous poster from the First World War, because this was people were volunteered to fight in the First World War, as they did in America as well. And so these are very similar posters that's a stamp obviously over there. This was a poster that went up everywhere. And there's Wilfred Owen there down on the right. This to me is one of the most moving films that was ever made. J'accuse, by a French director, Abel Gance. And when he says J'accuse, it was made in the final months of the war. Accusing, he said, when he was asked, who are you accusing? He said, I'm accusing the war, I'm accusing universal stupidity. And he used extras. He used some 2,000 extras who would be filmed in a scene in which they were the dead returning to a village. And if you can see in the middle picture there, they're sort of wearing death marks. They look like the dead. And these were people fighting. They'd been on leave and they were fighting the battle at Verdun. And many of them knew that they were being filmed as dead and that they would return to fight and be killed. And they did. Something like 80% of them died in the next few weeks fighting at Verdun. So there is a haunting quality to the film because you see people acting as dead who you know would die very soon after that shot was taken. It's a very powerful film which is exposing both the horrors of war and indeed the stupidity of war. Women served in many capacities during the war, and this is something that had tremendous impact, of course, on women's rights and so forth afterwards. And there we see in the top left a woman's poster advocating in America for women to serve as nurses. But they didn't just serve as nurses, they also served down bottom there, firefighters, and top right there, in munition factories. And that meant that they were exposed to explosives, and many of them were, as a result, harmed. Their skin turned yellow, and they were known as known as the Canary Girls, which is the title of this book here, because that's what their skin turned as a result. Overall, women made a huge contribution to the war. And after it, they had, of course, proven their value to society. That may seem a stupid way of putting it, but it's almost as if there was no awareness before of the abilities of women to serve in capacities that were absolutely critical for the war effort and in other ways as well, of course. So this is before and after World War I. And if you look at the top slide here, you can see the Austria-Hungary area here, Serbia underneath. And here, this is Austria and this is Hungary, basically two separate countries. The empire collapses very soon after the war, and Yugoslavia will be a consequence of the war as well. So really, among the most important results is a redrawing of the map of Europe. But there was much more that happened. And it was, of course, labeled as the war to end all wars, the Great War, it was called. It led to 16 million dead. Europe was devastated. Mass production techniques, and as always in wartime, technology improves. Think what's happening in Ukraine with the development of drone warfare and so forth. Each side is developing techniques that it hopes will cause its side to have the advantage. And one should not forget, of course, the development of the atomic bomb in World War II as another consequence of techniques being developed. Modern surgery was introduced. Horrible wounds were suffered, of course, by people as a result of shrapnel, etc., etc. And surgery really did develop to deal with injuries that were quite horrific. Doctors started to study the emotional effects of war. If you ever go on a website about World War I, you can see some of little clips of people who are so traumatized by war that they are unable, they're just fidgeting all the time. And trench warfare, obviously, introduced to the public awareness, so it wasn't called this, it was called shell shock. We would call it today post-traumatic stress disorder. I mentioned that the Austro-Hungarian Empire was shrunk, but so was the Ottoman Empire as well. And then, importantly as well, the British Mandate of Mesopotamia, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon were carved out of the Ottoman Empire. The Russian Revolution breaks out in 1917, ending the rule of the Tsar, Tsarist autocracy, and Yugoslavia was formed as well. Another consequence was the rise of spiritualism. So many people lost those who were close to them, sons, husbands, brothers, etc., that there was a deep desire that developed to somehow be in touch with the dead, to be able to think that the two worlds of the living and the dead were connected for all time. And many people believed that they could be contacted through seances, which is what you see going on the right there. And it was a mark of the desperate sense that so many people had lost those closest to them, and they could not let them go. So this saw, as I say, the rise of spiritualism. What about the long-term consequences? Not surprisingly, the role of the aristocracy was greatly reduced. More people acquired the right to vote, including eventually women. The US emerged as the leading financial power in the world. The British promised. Oh, we got a second one. Okay.
It's working.
Is it working?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what I did. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I know I've got backup there if I need it. Very good. And perhaps most important, it was not the war to end all wars. Far from it. Oh dear.
Right now.
I'm on now, right? Good, good, good. Thank you very much. Thank you. Very good job. Yeah, round of applause. Yeah, thank you. The Balfour Declaration. Lord Balfour was, he had been Prime Minister, but now he was only Foreign Secretary in 1917. And he issues this very famous declaration in which he says, His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Well, this, however you regard it, was, of course, to have enormous consequences and in some sense to justify the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. He does go on to say, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, etc. But nonetheless, it gave the green light to the establishment of a Jewish state. So, and it was a consequence of World War I. And Yugoslavia, the land of the South Slavs, was formed, and you can see the landmass there and the countries that it absorbed, so to speak. So Serbia became part of Yugoslavia, and in some sense, it achieved its objective in that this was a kind of pan-Slav state, but at the same time it was riven with its own divisions as well, Christian versus Muslim, etc. And it wasn't the case that all Slavs lived as one happy family, as we know all too well. And here's a gentleman who emerged from World War I as well, Lance Corporal Hitler. Looks like a harmless, unassuming man who couldn't hurt a flea there, I think. He was courageous. He was wounded in the thigh, and he insisted on being sent to the front line. He first won the Iron Cross second class, and then he went on to win the Iron Cross first class. And he was also temporarily blinded by mustard gas in the war as well. But he is one among, no doubt, millions of Germans who felt humiliated by the terms that were imposed on Germany at the end of the war by the Allies. Tremendous reparations they had to pay. The Kaiser was driven into exile, the Weimar Republic was established, and the Weimar Republic was completely inept and corrupt too, and it did a very poor job in preserving anything like moderation, and German nationalism rose as a result, ending in, or perhaps beginning in, the rise of the Nazi Party. So what if Princip had missed? Well, we can't be certain what would have happened if Princip had missed, but here are three possibilities. There would have been no World War I and no World War II and no Cold War and et cetera, however you want to make it, and the world would have gone happily on without any more wars anyway. That's one possibility, if you like to believe it. Another is there would have been a different trigger. It was just waiting for the fuse to be lit. And it really didn't matter that it was Princip who happened to be the one who lit the fuse, because anybody could have lit the fuse, and the result, sooner or later, would have been the same. And World War I would have broken out. And the third option is that there would have been a completely localized Balkan War without the great powers being drawn into it within just a month. So this is the what if theory, and who knows which is correct. I think we can probably cut out number 3, and probably we can cut out number 1. So I believe there would have been a different trigger sooner or later. I talked about historical revisionism earlier in the week, the way in which, after the event, people try to interpret things differently and to say, no, the Holocaust didn't actually occur. No, Winston Churchill was a racist and so forth, and not a great man at all. And this actually happened in the case, as you can see here, of Princip. There's a statue that was erected to him in 2015. He's become a national hero. No longer a terrorist or an assassin or somebody who lit the fuse to the First World War, but somebody who is venerated by Serbia. And there is President Nikolic, who is stating he was a hero, he was a symbol of an idea of liberation. Others can think whatever they want to. We were talking also about Guy Fawkes last night, how he was rehabilitated. And look, there is even a Orthodox priest who is sprinkling incense over the statue there. So the church is giving its imprimatur to his rehabilitation as well. He's being appropriated as a symbol of Serbian nationalism, of Serbian heroism, and of Serbian right to self-determination. Just a quick aside, it's not the first case, of course, where an assassin is rehabilitated. What do we make of, among the first assassins or terrorists, whatever you want to call them, the Sicarii? We're told by the Jewish Greek historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century AD, that leading up to the Great Revolt, the Jewish revolt broke out in 66 AD, that men with knives, that's the meaning of Sicarii, would go around when there was a press of people, and they would knife their target, and then they would disappear into the crowd, and they would go, oh my gosh, look what's happened over there, kind of thing. And the people that they would choose to kill would be those who they thought were collaborators with Rome. So they were a very dangerous force, and very insidious as well. Well, were they national heroes, or were they simple terrorists? And what if Thomas Matthew Crooks hadn't missed? Would we all be in the same situation as we are at this moment today? So that is where I will end it for today. And tomorrow I'll be talking about Hiroshima, the day the world turned nuclear. Thank you very much.
Media of the world at that time, which was, I guess, mainly newspapers.
Yes.
Were they serving the function of truth tellers or propaganda outlets of their respective governments?
Well, I think that, everybody was taken by surprise by this. I don't honestly think that news reporting played a very big effort in inducing the countries to go to war. I don't think that, I mean, to be honest, I haven't looked at all the newspaper reports of the period, but it was clear that they did report on the fact that Austro-Hungary had issued the ultimatum to go to war. But I think that in many ways, Europe held its breath. The news was not able to travel at the speed, in fact, at which events were really taking place at that time. So I doubt that it played much of a part in influencing public opinion. But as I say, I have not looked into the various reports that might have been around at that moment. I think it was a case of just trying to keep up with the speed of events at the time.
Doctor, I'm going to make a comment and then ask two quick questions. The comment is, my unit was the first unit to go into Sarajevo as part of what we called the implementation force, I-4. And what I found extremely interesting, I have stood on the exact spot where Princip fired a shot. And at that time, so that was December of '95, there were footprints actually in the cement there. After you turn that off the main drag, you made that little quick right, and it's perpendicular to the main drag, not as far as this young lady here in the tie-dye shirt,
right,
in on that street. But it is, yeah, there you go. So I found that interesting because that's Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is primarily Muslim, and he was Serbian, and my unit was in there to enforce the Dayton Peace Accords, of course, and I just found it interesting that a Serbian would, in this largely Muslim enclave, would be, kind of made a saint of some sort. That is now gone, I understand, because I looked for pictures of it online last night. But there is still in the wall now. There's an engraving, obviously official, that talks about that was the site, and I just find that interesting. So I'll ask you to comment on that. But the other two real quick questions was, in slide 2 or 3, you talked about an alliance. There was the alliance, and then there was also the treaty.
Entente.
Yes. So there was a treaty and an alliance, and I would like you to just that long describe the difference between those two. And the last was, and this is right in your ballpark, the spiritualism that came out of World War I. Did people, hucksters, play to that and use that with knocking and whatnot, to gain power, influence, money? Thanks.
Well, firstly, to your point about the footsteps, yes, of course, one might not necessarily take the commemoration of that event as an endorsement of it, but one can also see that it could be interpreted in that way, and therefore the sign that was where it took place was removed. It's a complex issue, of course, when we commemorate. Do we, by commemorating, celebrate or not? Hitler's bunker lies under a parking lot in Germany, and there's just a bare sign there saying something that nobody pays any attention to. It's always a danger, of course, that when you commemorate, that you're actually celebrating. Now, another point I've forgotten the second point. The treaty, yes, that's right. Thank you very much. Well, the Triple Alliance was a more, it required, whereas the Entente was an understanding that you would help. It was not the case that England, for instance, was required to enter the war, but it chose to do so. And there was a lot of debate in Asquith's government as to whether Britain actually should enter the war, and eventually, of course, it did. But there was more leeway in the Entente than there was in the Triple Alliance. Your third point is a very interesting one, of course. Now, I suppose one has to say, do we believe in spiritualism? Do we believe in the power to summon up the dead? If not, then there's only one answer to your question. A lot of people were making taking advantage of people's vulnerability, and of some very distinguished people. Conan Doyle, for instance, was a great believer in spiritualism, and he's not a stupid man by any means. So it wasn't the case that it just appealed to simple-minded people, etc., etc. Not that I like to think there are any particularly simple-minded people, but highly educated people also felt so devastated that they were easy targets for people who I think were really just after their own money. I don't know whether anybody's been to a séance here. I don't want to invade people's personal thoughts. I have been to one, and I was very impressed, not by the actual likelihood that the dead were being summoned up, but by the response of the audience. And I remember the medium saying, I'm hearing from a woman, and oh yes, she's talking to you. She wants you to know that she's okay. Well, that kind of thing is, and the person goes away comforted, of course, by that. But I happen not to believe that we can get in touch with the dead. So I would say unqualifiably people were duped. Thank you.
So Austria-Hungary is positioning itself to go into Serbia.
Yes.
And through some fake or fox,
Yes.
attempts to, make peace, it fails and they go in. It's what they wanted to do anyway. At the same time, Germany, less than a week later, is going the other way. So they must have been, it wasn't like Germany was rushing to Austria-Hungary's,
No.
to cover their back. They're going the other way.
Yes.
So there must have been communication between Austria-Hungary and Germany said, we're going this way, you go that way, to summarize simply.
Yes.
Um,
Definitely so. I mean, Germany had a long-standing plan that if war broke out, it would basically neutralize France very early on. What I mentioned was the Schließen plan, which is to go behind the back of the French army and basically cut it off from supplies and so forth, and take Paris within a few days. I mean, rather like the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The belief was clearly that Kiev would fall within a few days. It didn't happen. But that, sorry.
I guess that leads to the